As the celebrated author James Baldwin once said, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." I know that's why you're here. So in this video, I'll share with you a simple way to understand systemic racism and other related key concepts. Within the expansive field of DEIB, I've experienced race, racism, and systemic racism to be the most challenging. For this reason, in this training, I really want you to practice the shared agreements, particularly staying present and investigating discomfort. I'm here with you. Take breaks as you need, but do not look away. Give yourself the gift of 90 minutes. Our future generations depend on it. So with that, let me share a story. I became interested in systemic racism in law school. My second summer, I was observing sentencing decisions in a New Orleans court. 2 years, 3 years, 4 years at a time to Black teenage boys between the ages of 13 and 17 for petty things like breaking cell phones and trespass to property. I really couldn't believe it. I was sighing so hard that one of the guards escorted me out because I was disturbing the peace of the court. The question I continued to ask was, why such cruelty? I worked with the judges, the prosecutors, and the guards. They were all good people, but I felt in my gut that what happened in the courtroom is what's happening in our classrooms, in the boardrooms, in our operating rooms, and in interview rooms. And I wanted to solve for it. So as a big nerd that I am, I went to the research. Over and over again, I'd come across this term, systemic racism. As a former middle school teacher, I've been trained in simple, clear language that helps learning. But with systemic racism, there was too much complexity. The simplest definition I could find was embedded power disadvantages between white people and people of color in day-to-day decision-making of various social, economic, political, and cultural institutions that make up our society. But for me, this was insufficient. Because there are assumptions being made about entire groups, particularly groups of color and white people, which are often not so clear. But what was clear to me was that there are clear disparities between white people and BIPOC people across social, economic, political, and cultural life outcomes. This was my clue. So as a trained interdisciplinary social scientist, I led a research project at the Vera Institute of Justice to define and explain systemic racism without using the word race or racism. Breaking down social, political, economic, and cultural indicators, we used 8 life areas where we could study racial disparities quantitatively and qualitatively. And through the framework of root cause analysis, we identified 4 components of systemic racism. And they are lack of resources, from safe green parks to supermarkets and public transportations in places where BIPOC people live or work, to presence of trauma. Trauma being anything that's life-threatening or emotionally overwhelming. This includes disproportionate policing, but also things like toxic waste sites, landfill, incinerators, payday lenders that actively not just fill our bodies with toxins, but also our environments with toxins. These 2 components are what create food deserts, environmental racism, and other phenomena that you may be familiar with. The third component, policies. Obviously, the decisions to place supermarkets versus landfills in certain neighborhoods are dictated by policies. And fourth, bias. These 4 components give us something to hold on to and a more precise definition. What I call race-based inequities and suffering across systems caused by lack of resources, presence of trauma, policies, and bias. And suffering being physical, social, mental, financial, and spiritual harms that compromise wellness. I was thrilled because I felt like I somehow solved a puzzle, but the people I worked with in indigenous nations, in Black and brown communities, wanted solutions. They'd tell me, "Great job, you'll now write a few articles that'll collect dust on some bookshelf, while our lives and our futures remain tied to those 4 components." That's when I decided to leave legal academia to translate these findings into action. And what I found was, out of the 4 components, the only component that we each have power over is bias. And the remaining 3 are collective actions and decisions based on biases people share with one another. We often think of systems as machines and institutions as empty, sterile buildings, but actually, Systems, whether it's the legal system or the healthcare system or the education system, are made up of many different institutions. And each one of these institutions are made up of people like you and me, not empty, sterile buildings. Some humans, whether it's you or not, make decisions on behalf of institutions. And decision makers of various institutions make decisions for systems. It is their shared decisions that ultimately build systemic racism. So regardless of how egalitarian a person may be, unless they've broken their racial biases, particularly unconscious racial biases, their decisions sustain inequity despite their best intentions. And this is why you are so important. It starts with you. To address systemic racism, all of us need to understand how we got trained in racial bias so we can together distribute resources more equitably, heal the impacts of trauma, and mend policies. In the next lesson, I'll share an overview of racial bias.